Okay, with the Eibishter's help, today's daf is Masechta Bava Basra, daf Mem Aleph 41. And we're going to start from the Mishnah. Okay, the Mishnah.
Oh, okay.
You have to understand the Mishnah again is discussing chazaka in an ancient time where there was no recording of sales and deeds, so you didn't know if you own anything or you don't own anything. How long do you have to keep the purchase document? So the Mishnah said that if the person who bought the land stays on the land for 3 years, right, then it's automatically
The
3 years is a chazukah. Now,
Hazuka.
now, if the person that claims that hey, it was my piece of land, so the other person has to say, I bought it from you, and and I don't have the purchase document. I don't have the document anymore because it's all 3 years. But let's say he doesn't. So the Mishnah says, Kol chazaka, anytime you stay on a land for 3 years, she'ein imotana, that the person that's squatting on the land does not say any reason why he's there. He doesn't answer and say that he bought it from the person that is the ma'arer, the person that's filing the complaint. He doesn't answer back that I bought it from you. Eina chazaka. That's not a chazaka, and therefore, unless he says something, we give it back to the person that filed the complaint. Ketzad, for example, I'll give you an example. Amaloi, the man said to him, the guy who's on the field, the ma'arer says, the one that's filing the complaint says, Mo ata oise b'soich shali. What are you doing on my property? V'hu amar, and he says, V'hu amaloi, and he says to him, Shaloi amali adam dava ma'olam. Nobody told me that I can't be here. So that's eina chazaka. That's not a chazaka. That doesn't mean that it's yours. It's really reverts back to the person that's filing the complaint that says, hey, this was many, many, many years, this was my property. But if he answers back, shemachartali, you sold it to me, shenasatali b'matana, or you gifted it to me, or he says, avicha macharali, or he says, your father sold it to me, or he says, avicha nasana li b'matana, or he says, your father gave it to me as a gift. Oh, so he has an answer, his explanation why he stayed there 3 years. Harezu chazaka, then that is called a chazaka. So a chazaka is not just staying there for 3 years, but if you're approached and they ask you, how do you become the owner of this property, you have to have an answer. And you have to say, either I bought it, I was gifted to it. Now the Mishnah says, V'haba mishum Yerusha. Anybody who claims he inherited the property from his father, and they ask him, how did your father get this property? So then, Einet Sarach Taina, he doesn't have to answer, I don't know. He doesn't have to answer, oh, I know for a fact my father bought it, because he could easily say that I don't know the affairs of my father. All I know is that this was a property that my father had a chazaka on for 3 years. I don't know how he came to possession of this karka, and therefore it's mine. And that's it. You don't have to. He doesn't have to go further because you're not expecting him to know all the affairs of his father. So the Gemara says, Pshita. The Mishnah seems to be a simple Mishnah, because obviously, if someone says, "What are you doing on this property for 3 years?" and he says, "Nobody told me to get off," so of course it's not yours. That's not a chazaka. So what is the novelty of the Mishnah? Answers the Gemara, Mahu Desema. I would have thought, Hi Gavra Mizben Zabnele, a person that stays on a piece of land for 3 years, he obviously purchased the land. Hi Ara. Ushtara Havale, he had a document, V'irkas, and he lost it. Now he's too embarrassed to say that I lost it. So therefore, as Vahai de Ka'ama, and so in his naive way, he says the wrong thing. Vahai de Ka'ama Hachi, this is what he says, Savar. He thinks like himself like this. If I would say I bought this piece of land, which is the truth, Amrili, they're going to say to me, show me your purchase document. So therefore he's saying, instead of saying that, he's just saying that nobody told me to get off the land. So he thinks that's the better answer to the question. What are you doing here? So I would have thought Hilkach Leimale Anan. Let us say to him. Let us say on behalf of him. Dilma Shtara Havalach V'irkas. Did you have a purchase document and you lost it, and you're just too embarrassed to say that you lost it? And Kegoin Zeh Psach Pichal Ilam. In this case, to somebody who cannot answer a complaint against him because he's too tongue-tied, we will answer it for him. That perhaps you're embarrassed to say that you lost the document. So I would think that even if he doesn't say I lost the document, we would claim it on his behalf. Kamash Malon. So that's the novelty of the Mishnah. Mishnah is saying if the person himself that is on the land does not say outright, I bought it and I lost my purchase document, then we will not say it on his behalf. And therefore, if he does not say that, he just says, oh, nobody told me to get off, then he doesn't have a chazakah. And therefore, the person that filed the complaint will be able to kick out, evict the person that is on his land. Now the Gemara tells you 3 stories. Rav Onan shakal bitka ba'ara. Rav Onan, he had a property neighboring somebody else's property, and a flash flood came onto the property and uprooted the borderline between his neighbor and him. Azal, so he went. Hader gude ba'ari dechavre. He built the border, the fence, but he wasn't sure exactly where the border was, and he encroached a little bit onto his friend's property. So he made the fence a little further away from his property, and therefore he increased the size of his own property. Okay, so now many years later, the guy who he did that to complained and said, "Hey, you put the fence up wrong, and therefore some of that land that you have really belongs to me." So they came to Rav Nachman, and Rav Nachman told Rav Anan, Amalei Zil Hadar, you have to return back the property that you encroached on somebody else's land, because you built the wall wrong. You built you built back the wall wrong. Says the Gemara, Vo'achazikili. So Rav Anan said, I have a chazaka, because as soon as I built this wall, and this guy was helping me build the wall, he was already established that it was mine. And therefore, I don't need to be here 3 years. See, what Rav Anan thought that Rav Nachman paskined was the reason why he has to return back that piece of land, because this is not a chazaka of 3 years. It was a chazaka of 1 day. And therefore, it was a mistake. So the wall was built wrongly. So therefore, Rav Nachman said, give it back. But Rav Anan claims that in such a case where the person himself saw what you did and actually participated in building the wall, so basically he's like gifting me the land, and I made a chazaka in that land. So this extra piece of property, says Rav Anan, belongs to me. Amalei. So Rabbi Nachman said to Rav Anan, who says that you can claim chazaka, claim ownership on a land without holding it for 3 years? Kaman, who do you paskin like? Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shmuel, like Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shmuel, the Amru, that said, Kol b'fanav, if you make a chazaka in front of the owner, la'al tahav a chazaka, that right away it's a chazaka. You don't have to wait the full 3 years. So you want to say that you want to go like Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shmuel, that right away you have this chazaka, and therefore it's your land. But we say leis hilkasa kavosayu. The halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shmuel. You still have to be there 3 years, and you, Rav Anan, was not there 3 years, and therefore you have to return back that piece of land. Amalei, so Rav Anan said, Vo'achel, that guy was meichel me on this land. And therefore, it's not like I bought a piece of property and you're telling me I have to be there 3 years. This guy sort of like gifted me the property, because together we were building the wall. The Asa Vesaya Beguda Bahadai. He helped me build this wall. So it's almost like the man like right away said, you can have this piece of property, and I'm just going to move the wall back. So he agreed with me. Answers the Gemara, Amalei. So Rav Nachman told Rav Anan, it's Mechila B'Ta'usi. That was an accident. No, he didn't really mean to give it to you. At Gufa, you yourself, if you knew exactly where the original fence was, like avadata, you wouldn't have built this fence further into your neighbor's property. You would have built it the way it was. So just like you didn't know exactly where the original wall was. He didn't either know, and therefore your neighbor thought that actually the wall is being built correctly, and that's why he forgave you. But now that he came to his senses and realized and took a look at the survey and says that wall was built wrong, he has a right to claim it back. And as long as 3 years didn't pass, Rav Anan would be required to pull down the fence and pull it back into his property to where the original fence was. So that ended the first story. The second story goes like this. Rav Kahana, same idea. It seems that these rabbis, when they rebuilt properties, they made mistakes. Shakal bitka ba'ari. Again, a flash flood came into his land that was neighboring somebody else's, and the wall collapsed. Azal hada guda ba'ar deloy. So he rebuilt the wall. He rebuilt the wall in an area that was not his. So again, Rav Kahana, as the Gemara says, had a field, and a flash flood came and knocked the wall down that was bordering somebody else, and he rebuilt the wall, but he moved the wall that encroached into his neighbor's property. So we go to Amid Beis, Mem Aleph of Meis. I'll say Lekamed Rav Yehuda. So they came to Rav Yehuda. So okay. Also, so Isu Trei Sahade. So the neighbor brought two witnesses that said, Chad Ama, one said, Tarte Utsyosa. He moved into my property 2 rows. 2 rows, let's say 2 rows of wheat. That's a certain measurement. So that's one witness said that. He moved into my property 3 rows. So really, there are 2 witnesses that are saying that Rav Kahana encroached on somebody else's property. The problem is that these 2 witnesses don't have the numbers correct. One said Rav Kahana moved, let's say, 2 feet into some neighbor's property, and the other said 3 feet. So are they witnesses that could be relied upon? Because they don't fully align themselves in order to be witnesses. One would think that they have to be saying the exact same thing. So Amalei, so Rav Yehuda said to Rav Kahana, Zil Shalem Tarte Migoitlos. You have to move the wall back 2 feet or 2 rows, because both of them agree that you moved at the very least 2 rows. The question was, did you even move 3 rows? So one witness said yes, the other witness said not. So in that case, we still consider these witnesses as reliable. Amalei, come on. So Rav Kahana said, who are you basing your opinion, Rav Yehuda? Rav Shimon ben Elazar, like Rav Shimon ben Elazar, that holds that even when 2 witnesses are not exactly saying the same thing, they can still be counted as 2 witnesses. The Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Rav Shimon ben Elazar, Rav Shimon ben Elazar said, Rabbi Shammai and Basil don't disagree regarding that. We would consider 2 pairs of Eidim that they agree upon something. If you have 2 pairs of Eidim, 2 people saying this, Sha'achas, one pair of Eidim, one group of 2 says Mana, that says you borrowed a Mana. The Achas Omer is Mosaim, and some say you borrowed 200. So one says you borrowed 100, and the other said you borrowed 200. So they're 2 different Eidim. So therefore, you still owe at least 100. Sheyesh b'chlal masayim mana. Included in the number of 200 is the number 100. So both sets of Eidim, agree that you borrowed at the very least 100. What would Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue? Al kat achas. You have 1 pair of Eidim. 1 pair of Eidim. She'echad omer, 1 aid says, mana, you borrowed $100. Ve'echad omer masayim. And 1 aid says, you borrowed 200. Beis Shammai says this is unacceptable witnesses because they're not agreeing with each other. Beis Hillel says yesh b'chlal masayim mana, that within 200 there is 100, and therefore they are still considered to be valid witnesses. So based on this, according to Beis Hillel, But Rabbi Huda held that these are valid witnesses, although they don't agree on the exact number Rav Kahana encroached on his friend's property, whether it was 2 feet or 3 feet. But they both, at the very least, even the one that says 3 feet, agrees it was at the very least 2 feet. So therefore, that's why Rav Kahana, Rav Yehuda Paskin, that Rav Kahana has to return back what he took from his neighbor, because we have witnesses. Amalei. So, but Rav Kahana said to Rav Yehuda, that's not true. I'll bring you a letter, mimarava from Israel. The ain halacha Reb Shimon ben Elazar. The halacha is not like Reb Shimon ben Elazar, and these two witnesses that can't agree upon the number are not considered valid witnesses, and therefore you're basing your psak on the witnesses. These are not valid witnesses because we don't hold of what Reb Shimon ben Elazar said. Saying that Beis Hillel would agree that they're good witnesses. We hold that they're bad witnesses because they're not exactly saying the same thing. Amalei, so Rabbi Yehuda says, right now I'm upholding my psak, and if you show me the letter, then I may retract. But right now you have to follow what I'm saying, and therefore you have to return back that property that you encroached on your neighbor. Story number 3, and this is the final story of the night. Hahu Gavra, there was this person. The door bekashta beilasa arba shina. He in the city of Kashta. Okay, there was a place. Guy lived on the second floor of somebody else's house. Arba shenei for 4 years. He lived on somebody else's house. Asa mare de bese the ashkate. So the owner of the house came in and found somebody who was squatting in his second floor apartment. Amalei, so he said to the guy squatting on his second floor apartment, my boys behind besa, what are you doing in this house? Amalei, so the guy answered, I really didn't buy the house from you. Mi planya zavinse de zavina menach. I bought it from somebody else who bought it from you. And therefore, maybe it was a condominium or whatever. I bought it from somebody who bought it from you. And therefore, I have a right to live in this apartment. And I've been living here 4 years, so I don't have the purchase document. So what do you do over here? I'll say, so he did, what the problem is, he's not saying, I bought it from you. He's saying, I bought it from somebody else who bought it from you. Is that a valid response? Because if it's not a valid response, you have a chazaka of 4 years, but it's not a valid response. You need a chazaka to be a valid chazaka, has to have a response too. So also the kame to Reb Chia. So they came to Reb Chia. Amalei, so he said, if you can prove that the person that you bought it from, who you claimed you bought it from, actually lived in that upstairs apartment even one day, then I let it. I buy your story that you bought it from him. This guy bought the apartment, lived there for one day, and then resold the apartment to you, and therefore I would believe you. But if you can't prove that the guy that you bought it from was ever there one day, I won't believe you, and therefore you're just sitting in this apartment illegally, and you'd have to get out. Amar Rav. So Rav said, I was sitting there when my uncle, Rav Chia was Rav's uncle from both sides, from his father's side and mother's side, and Rav Chia was, when Rav Chia made this psak, the Amarli, and I told him, Rav Chia, why does the person who he claimed he bought it from had to have been living there one day? Maybe the guy that he bought it from bought it and stayed there one night, or maybe never even moved in. Isn't it sometimes people buy things and they right away sell it? They don't even move in. So why do you have to prove that the guy actually lived in the apartment one night? So when I told this to Reb Chia was thinking about it, and it makes sense. There are some people that don't actually buy something and never move in. And he started to see my point of reasoning. And then he said, Reb Chia said, if the person who is in the property, the muhsak, says, I saw him, the person I bought it from you, and I saw him buy it from you. I saw the bill of purchase that he bought it from you. So here he's saying, as a lone witness, I saw a transaction took place that you, the ma'arer, sold it to the person that I bought it from. So then we would believe him. Why? Because amigoy, because he could have said something else. The boya amale anozavanta minoch. I bought it from you. So with amigoi, he would have been believed. He could have said something bad. If he really wanted a lie, he could have said, oh, I bought it from you. And then that's a chazaka with a taina. Now that he says that I really bought it from somebody who bought it from you, we'll believe him if he says clearly, I saw when that other person that I bought it from you. Then he's like, making his story very strong. So then we would believe him, and then the chazaka will work. Rava said like this, Kavasi de Rav Chia Mestavra. Rav Chia makes perfect sense that you have to prove that the guy at least stayed there one day. That if he says he bought it from somebody who bought it from you, you have to say that the person that I bought it from actually lived in this apartment one day. Diktani, because we learned in our Mishnah, Haba Mishum Yerusha, someone inherits a property, Ein Tzarech Taina. He doesn't have to come up with a reason of how his father got the property. As long as he says, I got it from my father, he doesn't have to say how my father got it. So the Gemara Darshans from our Mishnah makes a diuk from our Mishnah. Tanu he boy. He doesn't have to explain how his father got the property. Hara'aya boy, but doesn't he have to prove that his father lived in the property at least one day? So the Gemara says, no, not true. So we see that you always have to prove that the person you got it from actually was there one day. So the Gemara says, you don't need to bring a proof, and you don't have to come up with any other reason how your father got it. In other words, you don't need anything. And when you got something from your father, you can just claim ignorance on all accounts. I don't know if my father stayed there. My father just wrote it down on a piece of paper that this is his property, and I'm inheriting it, and that's it. That's what the Mishnah means. You don't even have to say that your father ever used the property. The Ibai Sema, if you want, I can tell you, maybe if you get something from your father, you actually have to prove that your father actually lived there. But Shani Lekech, but a buyer claiming that he bought it from somebody who bought it from the original owner, there we believe the buyer. Because he wouldn't throw out his money for nothing. We know that a buyer does more investigation than someone who inherits property. And therefore, the fact that he bought it and paid money for it, and he claims he paid money for it, so he must have been certain that the person he paid the money to actually owned the property by buying it from the ma'ara. And therefore, we believe him, even if he can't prove that the one that sold it to him was there for a day. Nevertheless, Rav Chia holds that if you're claiming that the person you bought it from, that you bought it from somebody else who bought it from the original owner, you have to prove that you were there, that the the person who bought it was there for at least a day. So the Gemara says, Ibaylo, let me ask you a question. Near a boy mile. Let's say he can't prove that the person he bought it from actually lived in the apartment for a day. But he can prove that he came into the apartment and started taking measurements. Once you start taking measurements of an apartment, isn't that an indication that you bought the apartment? So Omar Abai said, that's exactly it. Even if you don't see him live in the apartment, the fact that he came to take measurements of the apartment, that must be that he actually bought the apartment. Rava says, no. Avid inish desire ayah. People often will start measuring properties, and they don't purchase it. So in this case, if he could only bring witnesses that he took measurements of the apartment, but not actually lived in the apartment, then the guy that's a muhsik would not have a taina. It's not a good, we wouldn't hold his chazak as valid. And therefore, if he claims that he bought it from that person, and if he can't prove that that person was there for a day, then we wouldn't, his chazak is not valid. And if he doesn't come up with the purchase document or anything, then that he bought it from the ma'ara, the buyer that's filing the complaint, then we're going to actually ask him to remove himself from the property. Okay, Be'ez Hashem, we just finished Daf Mem Aleph, and we'll do Mem Beis tomorrow.